Great. Once again, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making the time and sharing your weekend with us. My name is Meenakshi Iyer, and I'm the founder and principal of North Star Solutions and Services, which is a boutique future work-oriented coaching, training, and consulting practice. I'm physically located in Virginia in the US on the East Coast, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here with all of you today and to be here with you, Priya, co-hosting this Conversations That Matter. Thank you so much for creating this opportunity for me and for everyone else.
Thanks, Meenakshi. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Some familiar faces, hoping to see more, make new friends, and have an engaging conversation with everyone. I'm Priya Ramesh, a Master Certified Coach from ICF, and work in the leadership space across industries, across levels of management. And absolute pleasure to partner with Meenakshi and create something new.
Absolutely.
Thanks to everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you. And as we get started and get set up, we invite everyone to share in the chat where you're joining from, and feel free to connect with one another. So feel free to plug in your LinkedIn profile links in the chat. I'm also going to plug in a link here, and it's called Idea Boards. That's the tool. And I invite all of you to click on that link. And I'm going to share my screen here and just show you how it works in case you've not used this before. So we'd like to, one of the goals for this conversation series is also to source crowd wisdom. And one way we are going to do that is by inviting everyone to share your thoughts. And so all you have to do is click on this plus sign, a little post-it will pop up, and you can type on that. And at the end of this conversation, we'll come back and take a look at this, and this will be shared with everyone. So I invite you to use this, and this way, whether it's a thought, what's your takeaway, what questions you have for us, anything else that comes up for you. So feel free to use this link, and I've just plugged it in the chat. And as I mentioned earlier, this session is being recorded, and we'll upload it to our YouTube channels afterwards. All right, so we just wanted to get us started. We were wondering, what is it that you typically do on a Saturday at this time? Feel free to respond in the Zoom chat. How do you typically spend this time on a Saturday? Please put it in the Zoom chat. Playing with kids. Oh, that's a lot of good stuff. Yoga, brunch, going for a walk. Typically watch Netflix. I'm usually reading something on LinkedIn. And enjoy my coffee. Because it's 10 a.m. for me, so I'm usually doing breakfast and coffee at this time. Meeting friends, yoga. This is wonderful. So and this, absolutely no pressure at all. So now we are really curious as to you are giving up all that and being here with us today. So not only do we appreciate that, we are curious as to what makes this conversation matter to you. So I've put a link in the chat. If you wouldn't mind clicking that link and plugging in your response. What makes this topic a conversation that matters to you? I'll be sharing the screen in a minute. And we have a few more people joining us. Thank you for being here and sharing your Saturday with us. We've just been asking everyone, what do you typically do on a Saturday at this time? And we had a lot of fun responses in the Zoom chat. So our next question is, we are asking, and I'm plugging in the link again. So now that got us curious as to why would you rather be here today? What makes this conversation matter to you? Okay, so we're getting some really fantastic responses. I'm going to share my screen in a minute. Please keep on adding your responses. This is what we're seeing. Curious about the topic, learning, passionate about communication and of great value in coaching.
Yeah.
Great.
That's quite interesting. It seems to have covered a large spectrum, starting from mental well-being to making this an important or a critical factor for successful human team and workplace interactions. That's really lovely to see. Yeah, curiosity on this big topic. Yeah, it is big, and this is where it all started for Meenakshi and me. There are oftentimes words that we hear of and that looks big, right? And it gets thrown around quite a bit in the corporate corridors and in the leadership spaces. And we often wondered, what does it actually mean? And wouldn't it be helpful for us to really delve deep to understand what it actually means? So the series is going to be like this, that today we're going to talk about what it means. And we're going to co-create some learning here. The next session is going to be on why this is important. The third session is going to be how do we now actually put this into a behavioral aspect. How does it show up as behaviors in workplace? Because oftentimes these are just big words which we don't know how to implement, or we don't know what it really means in terms of, can we see it? Is it visible? And how do we actually do that? So that's how the next three sessions are going to be today, the next one, and the one after. And the section 4 and 5, we are looking to bring in panelists from various sectors in the corporate to see how do they actually put this into practice in their real-time space, how do they see this in their workplaces, and therefore how can some of us who can learn from it and start implementing. Yeah, and this is critical. This is an important conversation. When Meenakshi and I spoke about it, Meenakshi had invited me for one session of North Star Solutions, and it so happened that at the end of it, while we were debriefing the session, we said, there are some things which are important but not spoken enough about. And we decided that we will unpack some such words, corporate speak as we call it, because these are important, especially now, given the situation where we are recreating workplaces, right? Soon after the pandemic, people are coming back to work, trying different styles of working. And somehow this topic of psychological safety has, in many ways, I think it's the right time to talk about, because it's critical. And it's important because we're not working the way we used to work earlier. So given all of that, I thought this is, for me, this is very, very important. And as a coach, I'm a practicing coach. And as a coach, I find unless this space or this environment is created in such a way that people can be themselves, no real change happens. Yeah. And I want to invite Meenakshi to ask Meenakshi, what about this conversation is important for you?
Wow. um, there's so many reasons, and I cannot thank you enough for bringing it up. And the conversation that we were having was in celebration of International Coaching Week earlier in May this year. And you brought this up, came up with the phrase "conversations that matter." It's been so for me. Why it matters is that I believe in self leadership. I call myself a personal agility and self leadership coach, and to me, first of all, each of us has the potential to be a leader, and leadership is available to everyone, and we just need to access it. And I feel like a lot of times these concepts so abstract, seem so out of reach that we tend to think that leadership is someone else's responsibility. And that, oh, I don't have a team reporting to me, so I'm not a leader. I don't have the title, so I'm not a leader. So for me, it's very important to really sort of bust that myth, if you will. So I strongly believe that leadership is available to everyone. We just need to access it, and these concepts need to be made accessible. And that's one of the uh, goals of my work as a coach. And it's very important to me to that these concepts don't just remain as buzzwords or corporate speak, that there is a very intentional space that is created to break down these abstract concepts into really tangible how-tos. Um, and so when you brought this whole idea up and it emerged during our conversation, I was very excited to get started and get to work with you on this. The other piece, Priya, and everyone, I'm sure a lot of us will agree that at work, and especially in the context of virtual hybrid work, as Priya, you were talking about, the human experience at work is paramount. And especially in the context of knowledge work and in the digital economy that we're in. And something that I've observed, and I come from the space of technology, and I find myself, my strength is to really operate at that intersection of people, process, and technology. And most of my career, I've worked in technology and with technology leaders. And in terms of our people practices, what I find is that most of our people practices really date back to the industrial era, when it was all about when we had just newly discovered assembly line production, and it was all about productivity. And even our 8-hour workday really originates, thanks to Mr. Ford. But these days, how things have evolved, right? So they don't really, the practices don't really apply to human beings, and we are very complex, and we have emotions that really drive behavior. So to me, being able to do create the space to enable those conversations and make all these things accessible to everyone, I think that's why this matters to me. And of course, the opportunity to get to work with you. You are my mentor coach. So
It's lovely to see so many of us here, and just want to say that it's not going to be just something that we are going to download to everybody. It is a space for co-creation, and hence that idea board out there. So let's move on then to really check. Let's unpack this word psychological safety at work. Yeah. So inviting everybody to put on the Menti meter. I think Meenakshi, you've yeah. Do write and let us know what this phrase psychological safety at work really means to you. What does it mean to you? So just click on the link there and you'll be able to type in your answers. We're seeing some responses.
it's just coming up. And I just also want to add, in case anyone, if the link is not working, feel free to put it in the Zoom chat. That's fine too. Yeah. Okay, so we're seeing some responses, and I'm going to share my screen in just a minute. We have a colorful, wonderful word cloud. Excuse me.
Hmm. Lovely. There's so much of self, right? That's coming up.
Hmm. And
Belonging.
yep. Something that caught my attention was no retaliation
Mm.
and fail fast and it's okay. My ideas matter. And of course, bringing whole self to work.
And
I
what
matter. Yeah.
I'm
Sorry.
yes. And what really stands out right at the center of it is a sense of belonging and the
Yep.
authentic self,
Yep.
right? It's beautiful.
Acceptance of novelty. I saw that somewhere.
Mm,
Non-violent communication, non-judgmental. Yeah.
that's beautiful. Because, I mean, this is it. This is what psychological safety is. And, the question we asked is, what does the term mean to you? So clearly, there is a very personal resonance to what you've written over here. Either you've experienced it or you have not experienced it. This is a beautiful capture, Meenakshi. I think we should save it and keep it because
Yes.
it's pretty comprehensive, I must say. So it really brings to light what it means to most of us. And if you want to put in a theoretical reference to it, I think it's good for us to just understand how we function as human beings. How does a human brain function, right? We are wired for survival. So we are all the time scanning our environment for threat. Are we safe or are we threatened? It's no longer about physical threat, but it's at workplace. It's more about psychological threat or emotional threat, right? So we are constantly scanning our environment. That's how we are wired. And when we spend all our energy on looking for threats and making ourselves safe, what we're really doing is we are building fortresses around us, we are putting barricades to keep us safe, we are protecting ourselves. All our energy is going in defending ourselves in case there's an attack. Is there a threat to us? So, therefore, what level of energy is available for us to grow? Very little, because most of the energy is gone in protecting our self. Yeah. So we need to really understand that that's our default way of functioning unless we consciously take the effort to put down our guard or to feel the safety in our environment that allows us to grow. So there are 4 levels of psychological safety. The first one is the safety of inclusion. And we did see that word belongingness, right? Was one of the words that came up in the Mentimeter screen. And it said, yes, a sense of being included creates safety. And there are many things that can create that space where someone invites your views and they actually listen to it. Someone who gives you space to speak, or an environment that allows you to feel oneness with the others. For example, this group right now, right? We have shared what we do typically on a Saturday. That's a part of sharing that we have done that already creates a sense of belonging and the safety of inclusion. The second level of safety, psychological safety, is that of sharing. Yeah. So unless we feel safe, we're not going to be sharing much. And so what does an organization lose? It loses ideas, it loses thoughts, it loses people because there is no open sharing. The third level of psychological safety is that of learning. And I think we did speak a little bit about it, which talks to the growth mindset, right? Where we are trying to grow. There is no space for learning when we don't feel safe. Because, like we said earlier, all the energy is gone in safeguarding ourselves from threat. So, if we want to learn something different, something new, we've got to first take care of ourselves before we are able to do that. And so, as individuals, as employees in an organization, we do lose out. And the fourth and the most critical one, which lies on the foundation of inclusion, belongingness, and learning, is safety of contribution. Now, the contribution comes, an environment that allows people to question status quo, an environment that allows people to ask questions which are awkward, difficult, but still ask, an environment which allows you to have a different opinion, where you agree to disagree. That's the space for innovation and creativity. And I think we are in a space in the world where that is now the most important thing, where we innovate and reinvent ourselves. So that's inclusion, learning, sharing, and contribution. These are the 4 levels of psychological safety. So, sorry? That's just an interference of the audio, somebody's audio, right? So this is what it is. So we are able to, if we are able to do all of this, which is share our opinion, contribute ideas, not be afraid of how it's going to be impacting us in a negative way. Somebody talked about no retaliation, right? Where you're able to be vulnerable and be your authentic self. Bring all of yourself to work and be okay with that. That's the space of psychological safety at work. So when we talk about recognizing environment where there is psychological safety, automatically the next question that comes up is, what if there is a deficit? How does that show up? So Meenakshi, what are your thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, I have been in environments like that. And I think the first indicator of that I've seen is organizational silos, because there's a lack of trust. And there is the need to hoard information and not share. And I've also, the other indicator of that I've observed is meetings where leaders tend to talk. It's a broadcast. It's a one way. So most meetings are one way. And when opinions are asked, or when there is an open floor, there is pin drop silence. And then, at a few years ago, when we still used to go to the office to work, I would find that we had people would meet before the meeting and after the meeting. There'll be these hush hallway conversations. People are on IM, on instant messenger chat during the meeting. So they're saying things to someone that they trust, that they don't feel safe enough to bring up in the forum itself. So there's a lot of shadow conversations, if you will, that would happen, and that really hurts the team more than help it. The other thing I've observed is there is a fear of retaliation. And in my experience with technology teams, for instance, I have observed that a lack of, or a deficit of, psychological safety, the way it shows up is, one of the ways it shows up is risks not being called out sooner. So we're getting ready for, let's say, a client implementation, and project is obviously at risk. And those of us that are project managers here may have heard of this term called, it's a watermelon status, meaning it's green on the outside, it's red on the inside. So the project is really delayed and out of, it's over budget, over scheduled, but on the outside, everything is green, green, green. We typically use a traffic light model to talk about project status. And so it's a watermelon status. That's a clear indicator of a deficit of psychological safety, because people don't feel safe enough to call out risks or call out potentially suboptimal decisions that leadership is making. And people close to the ground realities often know. They are better judge of the situation because they are the one closer to it, but they all oftentimes it's above their pay grade to make some decisions, right? So those are some things that I would say that overall it leads to when I have been in such situations, I felt like I've been robbed of all the joy at work. I just show up because it's a paycheck. So that's what I've seen.
Thanks for sharing that, Meenakshi. I invite all of you, any of you have any thoughts on this as we speak, please use the chat box to put your comments, your experiences, all welcome to add there, because we are creating a space where all of us collectively understand this. One other thing that came up to me when you were sharing, Meenakshi, is that there is an interplay. Psychological safety creates trust, and trust is created by psychological safety. So somehow you can't separate the two. They seem to be very closely intertwined. And who wants a work environment which is an echo chamber?
Yep.
You do want new ideas. You do want different creativity to show up. You do want to have empowered people speaking up. And I think that's important to create that space of where diversity is accepted, of all diversity in all sense of the word, and there is a sense of inclusion, right, which is belongingness. So love to hear some more thoughts if you have any. Lack of transparency. Yeah.
And I also saw Meenal Rajvanshi. I saw your hand up. Did you have a question or a comment?
Hey, Meenakshi. Yeah, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to give my insight in here. More, I agree with what you're saying that most of the meetings are mostly broadcast. I have been working as a manager and a product manager, and then working with many folks, many project managers under me. So I have seen all kinds of people, and I agree somewhat with what you're saying. But then all comes down to how good your relationship is with your immediate supervisor. If you are comfortable with them, you will be able to open up and be able to discuss that issue you have in front of the bigger audience. Otherwise, you have that kind of a fear of what next, of what the repercussions would be, or more of a repercussion, not even what the reaction would be. So because all of a sudden you have this negative attitude that it might be taken as a wrong thing. So
Yeah. So this really talks to, thanks Meenal for sharing. What it brings up is, the work of B.F. Skinner in the behavioral learning model from the space of psychology. They say that the learning is, behavior is learned. So if you were to do something, for example, speak up, there's no problem with speaking up. But when you speak up, if you receive a positive stroke from the other, it's more likely that you'll speak up more often and you will not hesitate. But if when you speak up, you receive either non-acceptance or a dismissal or a retaliation, or not being heard even, that will teach us not to do this again, which means not to speak up. So this is a learned behavior. And when you spoke about it, Meenal, perhaps whoever is your supervisor has been able to create that space for you. And we are not talking just teams, we're talking about individual relationships, right? And any conversation, and every conversation can either create trust or create threat. So it really is important for us to be mindful of how we are having these conversations.
Absolutely. I do want to add something here. What both Meenal and Priya, what you shared, what that brought up for me is the learned behavior. And I think that's where the individual, what we are able to do, how we use our sense of agency to continue to do the right thing despite having received that negative reaction. Now, having said that, it also obviously depends on what kind of retaliation we're talking about. Is it like, is my job on the line? Is what kind of threat it is, and what is my appetite for taking that risk at that point in time? So I totally understand that those are considerations, but I also think that I believe that if I received uh, a, um, an unexpected response or a negative response to speaking up, um, as an individual, the sense of agency that I have and the courage that I need to have to build to continue to do that in the future as well, despite my first or my negative experience. That's the inner work in my mind in terms of keeping up my side of the bargain, especially in an organizational and a team context, to enable psychological safety. In other words, if each of us gives in, then how they say it's like leaders, organizations have to be really get worried if all their passionate people become quiet. So how do we ensure that we don't get into that? So that's something that came up for me.
Yeah. I think there's quite a few responses here, and so if this is a safe space, then all responses are precious and important. Yeah, and there is space for all opinions in this space. Lovely.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit then, what in our subsequent sessions, we would be talking about how do we enable this and why this is important. But just to give an overview, creating or enabling psychological safety at work, and I'm using the word enabling very consciously because it is something that's got to be very consciously done. And it's not done to you, but you have the capacity to do for others and create your own environment around it. It essentially talks about three competencies, in my opinion, and I'd like to call it I have this thing for acronyms. So T standing for trust. How can I exhibit trust building behaviors? I standing for inclusion. How can I bring in a mindset of inclusivity? It's a mindset. And E standing for empathy. How can I consciously connect with people with empathy? Because connection is everything. Because once connection is made, the fundamental human need is to be heard and to be seen. If those two are not there, there's no sense of belonging. And when there is no sense of belonging, not much of peak performance becomes all peak performance and all performance related activities become just activities. It doesn't really touch somebody to actually contribute and be effective. So these would be in many ways the competencies that help us create psychological safety. We talk more about it in our third session. So let's just take a sense of where the group is right now. Yeah, so does this bring up any questions for anyone? We could also look at the idea board and see if there's anything out there which might be useful for us to talk about. You're on mute, Meenakshi.
I'm just checking idea boards to see if there's anything there. I don't see anything there yet.
Okay.
Um,
So let's take a pause here. Keep your questions coming. Is there anything else that sort of this triggers a question in anybody's mind?
So Priya, clearly very important points here, right? I think the entire aspect of belongingness, what came up to me in terms of some of the experiences that I've seen people go through, it's usually a flight or fight response, right? And fight, in certain ways, confrontation is good, but if it becomes disruptive, then clearly it doesn't lead to anything productive. And there are groups that get formed, and it's a political environment. Flight, again, sometimes people leave, but sometimes they may not. So again, mentally, maybe they've taken a flight and the engagement levels are low. I think from organizational setup, there are a lot of leaders who provide this kind of a safe environment, but I don't know if there is any way of measuring it, right? To be able to, so that we can recognize that and appreciate that as well. So the question that comes to my mind is, how do we really measure this? Sort of, there any thoughts around that?
So I'll just attempt here, Neeraj. And but before that, I just want us to step back. I just loved what you said. When typically there's a sense of threat, there's either a fight, which shows up in the form of confrontation, which is disruptive, flight, which is avoidance, not even want to talk about it or escape from that space. And the third one is freeze, which is your mom, right? You don't want to share, like somebody else had put in the chat. Nobody wants to share anything. They just hold things to themselves. And this is the nature of this concept, right? Which is very implicit. And also why we are bringing it up for us to talk about in this group here. Because the more we speak about it, the more we sort of recognize how this is visible in work environments, or it's not visible. We only know that it's easier to pick up situations where it's not visible. A small example would be, I'm working with a group of young leaders, a coach with for 5 of them, who are very young and aspiring and want to do things in life and want to achieve. But oftentimes I hear in their conversation, I don't know if I can really share this idea. I've got this idea. I don't know if I can have this conversation with my senior. Now, to me, that's someone who's joined, someone who is aspirational, who's young and ready to go to contribute and make something of their lives as well as the organization. If this doubt comes to their mind, right, the organization is losing something. I'm not saying that his idea is going to be great, that it should be adopted. But are we giving space? Are there spaces in the organization which is free for just, we call it learning circles or talking circles, where people can just come and talk? This was created sometime during the pandemic, where some organizations where I was working with had what they call as listening circles. They just kept spaces once in a week for people to just come and speak. No judgment, no opinions passed. People can just share what they're experiencing. But those are situations which are extreme, which we can catch. But every day it's very subtle, it's very implicit. It's just underlying sort of experience. Rajesh, do you have something to add? I see your hand is raised.
Yep. Great session so far, and lots of learning. I just wanted to focus on the word freedom. How free do you feel at work? And that sort of determines how, and I think somebody used the word authentic there. When I'm a different person outside work, and when I come to work, suddenly everything changes. My demeanor changes. I'm clammed up. I'm not being myself. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. I feel that I'm being judged, and suddenly the whole sort of I'm not being myself. So this concept of freedom, how free do I feel at work? I think is probably a critical part of a psychologically safe environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it ties in so beautifully with being emotionally intelligent, right? So when we say freedom, there's an underlying responsibility with freedom as well. But can we speak what we want to speak without feeling that I need to watch who's listening and how they're judging me, and is this going to impact my appraisal? Are people going to talk about this everywhere? All of that. I think Alina has also shared a measure here. Lagging indicator on employee surveys on how engaged people feel. How they feel they're part of decision making, yeah?
One other thing I've noticed is how well am I understood at work? And the other piece is, and this had come up in one of the first mentees where people had said, it's fail fast and it's okay to do that. And to me, that's also largely environmental in terms of what is the typical organizational culture like. Culture to me, that's a whole other topic, right? So to me, culture is what is tolerated becomes culture. You can define it in any number of ways, but at the end of the day, the behaviors that are tolerated, that's your culture. Now, when ideas, for example, if let's say you're brainstorming and you're coming up with ideas, do you feel you're checking yourself before you filtering yourself before you throw an idea out? Because how worried are you about perception? How worried are you that that's going to just stick with you because will people laugh? Will they consider it? Will I even be acknowledged that I brought that idea to the table? So there are so many nuanced layers. It's like peeling an onion. There are so many layers in that one experience or one interaction. What is the response? And I think that in hybrid and virtual environments, there is an additional layer of complexity. Because we also tend to, we all have biases, and so we tend to quickly step into that space, and we are interacting with the stories we make up about people and not with the people themselves. And so that causes that. So we are in our space and the other person or other people are in their space, and everyone is viewing what's in there in the middle of it with their respective lenses. And how do you reconcile all of those versions? Because everybody's version is their truth.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some thoughts that were coming up for me as I was listening to everyone.
Just taking off from where you stopped, Meenakshi, and I think each of us have our own truths, right? We arrive at our own reality, our own truth, our own perception. It need not necessarily match with the other, but in an environment that allows for psychological safety, each of this is true and real for that individual. If that can be respected, I think we've made a great start to creating an environment of psychological safety. I might not agree with you. I don't think this is a great idea. I think this is not going to work, but I still hear you. So fundamentally, listening seems to be at the core of this, right? If we can, our sense of belonging, our sense of being seen and heard comes from a very fundamental need to be listened to be heard, not even listened to be heard.
Yeah.
Be open, yes. Hear everyone's version and be open to change. So curiosity is another skill there, right? Can we just be curious without already deciding from our lens, yeah?
Mm.
Lovely. Love to hear some more thoughts, opinions, questions?
Yeah, I'm going to check the idea boards really quick. And I also want to do a time check. So we have about 10 minutes left in the hour.
Yeah.
So what Priya and I had planned to do was roughly between 30 and 60-minute conversations. And this season has 5 conversations, like Priya alluded to earlier. That includes a couple of panel discussions as well. And we hope to take your questions from one session to the next.
Yes.
So there's a couple of
Invite
thoughts.
questions. Yeah. If it is related to this, or if it's something that can be fed into our next session, keep the questions coming, or keep your thoughts coming. Yeah. And one of the concepts that we spoke about, the 4 stages of psychological safety, we will be sending you a PDF version of that as a resource for you to read up and engage with. Yeah.
These are some thoughts that have come up.
Sure. All right. I think Sumita is struggling with the link for the idea board.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There we
So
go.
while Meenakshi is sharing that, let's just quickly, conscious of time, while Saturdays you would either be having your breakfast or walking with friends or watching a movie, and you've taken time out for this. So I really appreciate it. Here's some food for thought. Yeah, we did allude to it a little earlier. Are leaders responsible for creating psychological safety? Or is this power vested in each one of us, whether we are a leader or not? Any thoughts that you can add to the chat box? So do we wait for someone to create this at a workplace, or can we in our own ways also create this? Leaders have more of a responsibility. Yeah. Lead by example. Yep.
Each one of us has the power, says Sumita.
Yeah. Each one of us is a leader. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful what we are seeing, that we are taking the responsibility in our own small ways to create that. And I'm not talking about a large team. I'm not talking about a huge organization itself. I'm talking about every interaction that you have, every interaction, every conversation. There's an opportunity to either create a threat response or a trust response. And so in many ways, we do have the power to make it happen for ourselves and our ecosystem. Yeah. Respect others and create trust around ourselves. So I want to leave you with a question, right? And Meenakshi, you want to shoot the question?
Yep. So the question is, what will you start, stop, or continue doing to enable psychological safety at work? What's that one thing that you can start, stop, or continue doing? You can click on that link and share your responses. And I'll share my screen in a minute. Okay, so we have some responses coming in. Share my screen.
Listening deeply. Be an ally. Be empathetic. Start listening. Continue to listen and acknowledge. Nice. Being open. Yeah.
This really resonated with me by asking the other person before responding. Like, what would the other person like you to do to support them?
Start listening deeply.
And being open. Stop judging and controlling. Continue trusting and respecting people.
Unconditional positive regard.
Takes me
That's a
back to
big-
my Kocharya days.
So unconditional positive regard. That's I'm sure all the coaches who are here will completely resonate with that.
Meenakshi, I did put this: be non-judgmental and let the team know. This I have to give credit to Yogi from last week, where he said it's not just being non-judgmental, but if you just let the team know that you will not be judged. That's so powerful. I thought that was really important.
Yes, yes.
It adds to a safer environment.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think a lot of these words, this is a trusting environment, this you can trust me, but people really look at their actions and behaviors, right? So unless you actually demonstrate behaviors that create safety, there's no point in saying, yeah, this is a safe environment, you can say what you want, you will not be judged. Yeah. Be and let others be. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Wonderful.
The links are open, and what we'll do is we'll share this back with everyone. And there was one other link that I wanted to place back in the chat just now, and this is the model that Priya was referring to, and we'll send you this PDF version as well. This is the 4 levels of psychological safety. We've just plugged that in the chat here. We'll be, so this concludes the first session in this season, where we looked at what this term really means to you, and what does it look like in organizational settings. And we will be back here, same time, same place, on the 27th of August, which is 2 Saturdays. And really quick, a tech point. When you register on the Zoom link, please make sure you click on Add to Calendar. That way, the entire series will get downloaded into your calendar. Yeah. So make sure you click on Add to Calendar, and let me plug in the Zoom link one more time. So, and you can feel free to share the Zoom link, this registration link, with others that you think might benefit from this conversation, or folks that you think have stuff to add to this conversation. So I'm just going to put the registration link once again, and please make sure you click on Add to Calendar once you've registered. Here's the registration link. Yes, and a big shout out to the Building My Runway mentorship program cohort and alumni who are here today. So that's Northstar's mentorship program for mid-career women in tech. So all of you that are here from this current cohort and last year's cohort, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. And all of you, really appreciate you sharing your weekend with us, part of your weekend with us. And we'd love to hear back from you, what you would like to see less of, more of in the next 4 sessions. So please feel free to connect with me or Priya. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Priya, for sharing that. Yeah, so we're going to be digging into the why a little bit next in the next session. We have about 3 minutes. Any closing thoughts from anyone? You can come off mute. And thank you for all your kind words in the chat.
Yes. A big thanks to everyone for making time and being here. The idea of these conversation is that it triggers thoughts for you. We are in no way concluding anything or stating anything. It is just to get the thoughts going. And thank you so much for all your inputs in the chat and the engagement. We hope to see you in the next session with more questions and interactions.
Absolutely. And please save the chat, folks, before you drop off from the call.
On that note, it's bye-bye. Have a happy weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Take care and see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.